right now, the DEI deadline is just days away for Arizona schools. Hundreds of millions of federal dollars are at risk if schools don't eliminate the programs. School Superintendent Tom Horne tells us why he'll enforce a Trump administration demand. Also on Sunday Square Off, Maricopa County's new recorder, Justin Heap, shares his plan to dump a fellow Republican, the Maricopa County Board Chairman. Why Governor Katie Hobbs won't sign any more bills. For now, the sacrifice a Republican lawmaker was willing to make for Arizona parents who care for children with disabilities.
We have a diversity, equity, and inclusion policy that's full of inclusive language. It's not discriminatory.
That was Kevin Walsh, president of the Kyrene School District's governing board, defending Kyrene's diversity, equity, and inclusion policies. The U.S. Department of Education disagrees with Walsh. It contends the policies illegally discriminate. K-12 school districts across the country face an April 24th deadline, just days away, to certify to the feds they don't have DEI programs. If they don't certify, the schools face the possible loss of billions of dollars in federal funding. Arizona School Superintendent Tom Horne has warned districts about the looming deadline. He supports what the Department of Education is doing and says he'll withhold funding from schools. Welcome back to Square Off, sir.
It's good to be with you, Bram, as always.
Typically, the Education Department is a pass-through for federal dollars. We have about, 600 school districts here? Do I have that number right?
Yes.
Can you tell these districts when and why you would withhold or try to withhold federal dollars?
Well, we have to follow federal law. The Attorney General claims that we have no written basis for that. We sent her a copy of the instructions we got from the federal government and issued a press release that you may have seen. So first of all, I need to enforce federal law. She doesn't know anything about it. She deals with state law, I guess. But secondly, I agree with it for, I believe, an important philosophical reason. I believe the biggest philosophical divide in our country right now is between people like myself who believe in individual merit and other people who want to substitute racial entitlements. And the problem with racial entitlements is they don't motivate hard work, conscientiousness, creativity. And so if they were to win, we'd become a mediocre nation. China would become the dominant power, and they'd run the world, if you can imagine a world like that.
Okay, I want to go back to the original question. School districts need to know, if they don't certify by April 24th, would you immediately try to withhold federal dollars?
If the federal government tells me to, I will, yes.
If they tell you to.
Yeah, and they will probably, but I don't know how quickly they'll tell me to, but they will tell me.
That's interesting because the language of the certification document says may withhold. It's not a sure thing.
I think it is a sure thing. I think that's their policy. They said it in a kind of maybe a politically soft way, but they mean it.
Well, it appears to be a legal document that has the force of law.
Yeah.
You also mentioned federal law a moment ago.
Yes.
The question school districts and lawyers have is, and they have trouble answering it, what is the law? What is the law the federal government, the Department of Education, is referring to here?
The law they're referring to is the law against discrimination. DEI uses words that sound harmless, but in fact, in practice, as the federal government substantiated in their communications, it causes division on racial lines. It's exactly the thing that I'm philosophically opposed to.
Okay, philosophically, using words, the Department of Education and Donald Trump don't make the law, do they?
Well, they enforce the law,
but they don't make the law.
No, the Congress does that.
Congress does, or courts, clarify.
Yes, yes.
Is there a law that bans DEI?
In effect, yes, because there's a law.
In effect, what's in effect?
Well, because the law says you can't discriminate by race. I think race is completely irrelevant to anything and should not play any role in our schools. And the people who disagree and use DEI, as the federal government substantiated, do things that are divisive by race, and that's contrary to civil rights.
Shouldn't there be a court ruling or something you can point to that says, here, this is why this is illegal?
Well,
because they use the word illegal. That's a big word.
Yeah, it is illegal, and if someone challenges it, I think the court will support the administration.
You think the court, but it's at this point, it's just a position.
Well, the president...
The schools are not doing anything illegal right now.
They are, in my opinion.
You say, in your opinion.
Yes.
In your opinion.
Yes.
Your opinion isn't the law.
Well, I have to enforce the law and I have to enforce it as the federal government instructs me to, and the president is given the power to enforce laws, and if the law says you can't discriminate and he sees discrimination, he can prohibit it.
He sees discrimination, but no one has found discrimination.
Yes, yeah, it's very well documented, that DEI programs divide people by race.
But not by a court.
Well, it'll come before the court, I assume.
So it looks like this is headed to the court.
Yeah.
Here's what puzzles me. So in the name of ending what's alleged to be illegal discrimination, the Department of Education and you would cut off funding for programs that help low-income minority students.
Yes.
Something seems just out of whack there, doesn't it?
Well, you know, I have been opposed to this my whole life. When I was in high school, I attended the March on Washington, where Martin Luther King gave his famous speech. We should be judged by the content of our character and not the color of our skin. But my only powers there were to publicize so parents would know, and I would put it on the school report cards if they refused to answer my questions about racially discriminatory practices. Interestingly, the Kyrene School District, even at that point, was defiant. They publicly announced they would not answer my questions. Well, now the federal government has ability to really enforce, and I think that with that incentive, people will come around and treat people as individuals rather than based on their race.
Again, that question, in the name of doing away with legal discrimination, it appears the federal government is discriminating against low-income students of color.
No, they're definitely not.
They're eliminating the federal funding that helps them go to school.
It applies to all schools. There's absolutely no discrimination there.
But Title I funding is a big piece of that, isn't it?
Well, you know what? Actions have consequences. If you commit a crime, you go to prison. You could say, why would you put somebody in prison and take away his freedom? Because it's the consequence of what he does, and that discourages people from breaking the law. Here, we're discouraging people from focusing on race rather than merit in the way they conduct education, which I consider to be extremely important.
But again, your opinion, it's illegal. There is no law.
There is a law. There's a law that bans discrimination. The federal government.
This is discrimination.
No, the federal government has documented the fact that DEI programs do discriminate.
Okay. Well, likely to play out in court. I want to move on to the election, to ESAs. Republican school choice supporters are looking for a candidate to primary you.
Yes.
If you haven't heard, let's listen to Republican State Senator Jake Hoffman. He's a leader of the far-right Freedom Caucus in the legislature. Here's what he told me.
Katie Hobbs is unable to make serious negative adverse reforms to school choice in this state. However, Tom Horne is the single greatest threat to school choice. Tom Horne is the single greatest threat to the ESA program.
Tom Horne is the single greatest threat to the ESA program. Senator Hoffman went on to say he is looking for a candidate to primary you. Mm-hmm. Why would he say you're the greatest threat to ESAs?
Well, as you mentioned, he's an extremist, and what he says doesn't make any sense, and he doesn't represent very many people on this. I've been going all around the state getting petitions for my reelection, and I haven't had a single person say something negative about the way I do ESAs. Here's the issue. When I took office, I said every expenditure has to be for a legitimate educational purpose and a reasonable price according to the market. My predecessor didn't do that, so I used to hear about ski tickets and crazy things that were used to attack the ESA program. I'm a defender of the ESA program. I want it to succeed, and I want it to not end. And here's what I would have paid if I used his philosophy, which is I should pay whatever parents ask for. A $5,000 Rolex watch. These are real requests I got. A $24,000 golf simulator, which obviously would have been for the parents. Believe it or not, a vasectomy testing kit, over $1,000 fancy Mont Blanc pen. If I had paid those things, you would have loved it. It would have been big news, and the sustainability of the program would have been threatened. I feel I'm responsible for taxpayer funds. I'm responsible for the sustainability of the program, and I'm making sure that every expenditure is for a legitimate educational purpose and a reasonable price according to the market. And that has overwhelming support. He represents a small, tiny percentage, 1/8% of ESA parents.
Okay, got to end it there. Tom Horne, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Graham. I appreciate it. I'd love to come back whenever you want me.
All right.